Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 2020 Executive Leadership Mindset Conference. That's a mouthful. I'm super excited today to introduce you to a good friend. I've been excited about this interview for like 3 weeks. And I just wanted to introduce you to who I consider to be a really good friend of mine. We worked together years ago at a company called Aminco International, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that in our interview here. But this is the CEO and founder of HelloIam.com, Rachael Herrscher. Rachael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Dude, thank you. I'm so excited.
I'm seriously excited to interview. Number one, and we probably should just get this out of the way. We worked for an Olympic pins company in 2001 together.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about just after 9/11, the world was crazy then too.
Yeah.
We were selling these pins like crazy and using them for all kinds of like illegal activities, like trading them to get into things.
Dealing.
Exactly.
And then I would have to go and do these like assemblies for schools. And elementary school was no big deal. And then I'd have to do them for junior highs and high schools too, which you're just like, dude, these kids are judging me. This is super intense. And then I had to do one in Logan, which you did a ride along with me. So not only did I have to do an assembly to a bunch of high school kids, but then I got Riley like jeering me from the sidelines.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because that's how I work. That's how I roll, right?
Just kidding. He was so nice, but that was a lot of pressure.
You didn't feel pressure.
Listen,
you're like
listen, Utah State QB. We were in your hometown at that point.
Sure.
I mean, I know it's not your hometown, but you owned that town.
Kind of is my hometown. I lived there from 5 to 15 and then back in college again. So.
Oh my gosh. Okay. It's your hometown.
Kind of
fine.
Hometown. So, okay. So this is so fun. I'm super excited because I think the idea of this conference is to help people understand that resilience and grit and mental toughness and all these things happen long after we're done playing sports, long after we're done competing in high school or college for degrees and all that kind of stuff. And with your trail and with your path, it's just been really fun to watch all the amazing things that you've done. I always thought you were going to be amazing because you were like the funnest person to be around in our office.
You're so nice.
Don't share this with anybody else, but you were
Rob Harrison. I'm way funnier than you.
It's true.
He's out there somewhere.
He's out there somewhere. I'm sure when we get the Olympics again, we'll bump into him. But what I wanted to ask you is just give us a little bit of your path, where you're from, what you graduated in, and kind of what brought you into where you are today.
Sure. So like Utah all my life. I went to the University of Utah. I studied family and human development, but my jobs were always in marketing and sales. I even specialized in this little corner of family and human development called child life therapy. So I was going to work in hospitals. But it's this, we'll talk about this today, I'm sure, is that usually like your path of least resistance is usually the right path. And I was really used to being good at everything to that point in my life. I mean, that sounds really arrogant, but I was used to being able to work hard at a thing and accomplish the thing and be maybe at the top of my class and kind of shine at a thing. And in that program, I wasn't necessarily like top of the game on that thing. And I just kept meeting these points of resistance where finally I had to step back and say, okay, I'm in this program maybe to deal with more of my personal life, because I had a sister who was in hospitals for most of her life. And I think maybe that was my way of playing out my own therapy for that thing. But that I was really supposed to do another thing. And when I pivoted and realized my world is more over in this other place, things flowed a lot better. So, but that degree itself has helped me and served me and is related to everything I've done and do as a parent, but also in business because, we focus, a lot of our stuff focuses on families. So yeah, graduated from the U. And then when I worked as like a headhunter for doctors for a little while. And then when it came time to start having kids, I got as deep as child number 2 and realized that my job was further and further away. And the more I went down that path, and that I probably would want to do my own thing so that I didn't get completely displaced from the workplace. And that led to me launching several businesses over the course of the years.
Right. So take me from there. So you're headhunting, you decide to go out on your own. What is it that you're doing now? And is it still the same thing, or has it evolved into what you're doing now?
It's evolved a ton. So first of all, I went from headhunting or, recruiting doctors and that kind of stuff to having my first child. And I mean, we're in Utah, right? So I was 24, like little babies having babies. And at that time, right, the internet and the world was not the place it is today. And so the things I could do to fill in the gaps at that point, I cleaned houses, while my mother-in-law watched my first, Josh. I, did some phone stuff for selling mortgages and the things I could kind of do in the margins. And then by the time I had my second, that's where I kind of had this crisis of, oh man, like what's ahead of me? I don't want to be so disconnected from, what if something happens to my husband? What if life doesn't go as planned? I need a solid foundation to build from. And it kind of at the same time, shortly after she was born. So think I had a 20-month-old and a 2-month-old. And my friend Stephanie Peterson and I had this idea of, when you're looking for stuff to do with your kids and to find resources and places to go and things to do, there's just no great resource. This is in 2004. So imagine Yellow Pages are still a thing that we used at that point.
Right.
Does that make us sound ancient?
Yes.
It
We
does.
are ancient, by the way.
We totally are.
Somebody told me the other day that Biggie Smalls and Tupac are old school. And I was like, oh no.
Girl,
it really
please.
Is. It really is. It really is, right? Like these kids were born after that.
Totally. But I will tell you, I did a few years ago in junior high carpool, we had a heated debate with these boys in my carpool of whether Tupac was still alive. They really feel that he's living in Cuba right now. And I think I've watched the documentaries, dog. I think he's gone.
You think he's gone?
I think he's gone. I think he's in heaven.
There hasn't been as good of music. So I can't see how he's actually alive.
You know what? As a service to your listeners, I'm going to give you a link to my play-in list on Spotify.
Okay.
And it'll touch on some of these greats.
Okay, good.
Anyway, so I'm just making this such a long story, but ultimately my friend and I started a publishing company, and we created a book called the Utah Mama's Handbook. And it was a reference guide full of places to go, things to do, sports leagues, music lessons, anything you wanted to know in Utah. And then we sold ad space or coupons in the back. And then we sold that in school fundraisers. We sold it in Costco, bookstores, all over the place. And ultimately that grew and grew to the point where we were licensing that publication to newspapers all over the country. So we had publications in Seattle, in the Bay Area, in San Diego, in Texas, in Pennsylvania. And we were really growing that publishing arm of our business. And alongside that, social media started happening, right? And websites were, a thing that you would build. I mean, think with Squarespace or a WordPress template today, you can build a website for $75. We were probably in our first website, because we had to build our own CMS and then build little micro sites that came off it and all those things. I probably threw down $200,000, Riley. Nobody needs to do that today. I just want everybody to know and feel gratitude for how easy it is for you to slap up a website.
Wow. $200,000.
Oh, yeah. And not in one shot. That's like iterations and maybe over a year-long period, right? But I mean, it's just such a different world.
You're still paying that back? I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Ish.
You know what, though? Let's touch on that. As I started to license to newspapers and really grow and scale, and we had a number of entities, you know, with their eye on us to acquire us, and we were growing with an eye on being acquired. So we did raise funding. You know, we raised a Series A round, which, come to find out over the years, is pretty rare, I think, for a woman in Utah to raise funding. And Utah's received, I guess, like the worst rankings, I think, for women in the workplace in America. We're like at the bottom of the barrel. However, I'm also going to say that I think the opportunities here are great, and I've had such positive experiences.
Can we talk about funding for just 1 second?
Sure,
if I just
sure.
take a sidetrack?
What do you want?
So there, at one point, at this point, I was probably 27 or 28, and I was in a room full. There was a full of women. There was a fund that some women were trying to start, female investors for women. I think it was called Wave. And I was in a room of probably 200 women, all ages, all different kinds of businesses. And they asked in the room, how many of you have ever raised a round of funding? And I raised my hand. I'm 27, little, not a whole lot of business experience under my belt. And I was the only person in the room that raised my hand. The follow-up question was, how many of you have pitched to try to raise funding? I was the only hand that went up. So I think a lot of the issues that Utah itself has for women are that maybe a lot of women don't feel like they have a place at that table, or there's a lot of reasons women don't want to raise money and be beholden to somebody else. There's a lot of dynamics that we as women bring to the table that contribute to the fact that we're not raising money. So that was one of the really interesting experiences in my life, because I don't think I was better than anybody else in that room. I think I just asked, because I think there's so much opportunity in the state and in this country to go raise that round of funding and seize an opportunity. We just have to ask.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway.
That's phenomenal. And the company originally was called, you talk about Utah's Mama, and you started kind of spreading your tentacles, for lack of a better term, right?
Yep.
Spreading out all around. And then it evolved into todaysmama.com.
Yes. Yeah. It evolved into todaysmama.com in 2008. Right when, I'll tell you, it was like September 15th. It was that week of 2008 when we were negotiating a deal to be acquired and the contract with a newspaper company. And then, if you can remember, that week of that year,
I remember
markets crashed. It was a disaster, right? And newspapers were hit really hard. And all those targeted publications, that umbrella that we would have fallen under, they were disappearing overnight because newspapers were bleeding out the jugular. There were a lot of industries that started to bleed, and that acquisition went like this. So at that point, we pivoted. It hurt a lot. We pivoted out of publishing. The economy wasn't a great place to do that. Local ad dollars weren't a great way to make money, right? And so social media was then kind of on the rise, and you had all these bloggers on the rise, and we had this collection of websites that were talking to that same audience. And so we really doubled down on social media and online publishing at that point. So
what a cool and crazy ride. I remember 2008 very well, because that's when I bought my house, which was not the best time for me to buy my house.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we all go through it in a different way, right? And
yeah,
we certainly remember when that was all happening.
Totally. Well, and then so we I'll make this part quicker. Of course, we evolved over the years. The mantra to stay alive in business is that you've got to pivot, right? And so we've pivoted a lot with how fast times change. So, or I'd say also diversified our revenue, because we still have todaysmama.com, but in the process, we've run an ad network. We have an influencer network with over 5,000 influencers in that we connect brands with. We've hosted large scale events for other bloggers and people. And, ultimately we still own and run todaysmama.com, but we also have an agency called Hello I Am, where we help other people tell their stories. So we work with a lot of big brands running their content strategy, and then connecting with influencers and doing some Amazon marketing on that side of things. So
Amazing.
Fire hose.
Amazing story. Such an amazing story. So I think you talked about this a little bit, and I think when I think about the world from the sports psychology, aspect of things, which is where I am, I'm constantly thinking about mental toughness and about the ability, the mentality to really, I think mental toughness, if I were to simplify it down into 2 or 3 words, is adaptability, flexibility, right? Or pivoting.
Yeah.
To steal the word that you're using. Do you think that you've had to be mentally tough through this? And what are your thoughts on mental toughness in 2004 when you started compared to now? Like, do you think it's like your definition has evolved? Have you changed? Have your thoughts changed on that sort of a subject?
Yeah. So absolutely. So I'll start with an analogy that I was kind of alluding to before is I think as a younger person, I would have defined mental toughness as never giving up. I'm going to drive through the barriers. I'm going to tunnel a hole through that mountain. You know, I will overcome the thing. And really, mental toughness is flexibility. We all have these expectations, and expectations the root of all frustration, right? So, you know, when you first start your business, you write a business plan, and you might as well 2 weeks later turn around and set it on fire because it's not going to go the way you planned, right? And we get really attached to those things. So to me, like you said, flexibility is part of that mental toughness. So there's this analogy that Laird Hamilton makes. He has this book, I think it's called Body and Soul. And he talks about how you never see a river that runs straight. It moves with the curvature of the landscape. It adjusts. When that river met the mountain that was so big and insurmountable, what did the river do? It just like flowed gently right around it and found the best path forward for that little river, right? And to me, that's the ability to do that, the flexibility to do that is there. But alongside that is still tenacity. You know, it's still tenacity to like hang in there and hold on and make good calls and be aggressive, but you really have to adjust to the landscape.
Yeah, I love it. There was actually, I want to say it's like an ESPN 30 for 30, and it's about, oh great, of course I'm going to space his name right now, Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee, like the name of the documentary is Be Water, and it gives like a quote of him being water, right? And when you think about it, like not only when you look at a river from up above, you see it take kind of the path of least resistance, but it's still going and it's constantly moving. But I always compare it for athletes, like you want to be water in the sense that sometimes you have to go over the rock, sometimes you go around it, sometimes you go under it. And water doesn't seem to complain about the obstacle. It just continues to flow, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So
and it can be messy. Water can be so messy, right?
It can be destructive if you're not careful, but it can also be incredibly powerful, and it can give us electricity in it. I mean, there's so many cool analogies to like mental toughness and how we, if we compare ourselves to water, you know, as he says in my terrible accent. But it's just kind of a cool thought. And I think maybe I had talked to you about this before because it's all coming back to me now. I've used this analogy that you're talking about of water going around the mountain. And if you're sitting in an airplane, you can see that it's kind of taken the path that it needs to take, not the path necessarily that it thought it would take. Right?
Yeah. And you know what? Here's the thing about business too, is alongside you have this path for business, right? You have that, maybe that's one river. And you have life that's happening maybe in a different river. I don't know if they're blending all together. I don't know what my analogy is, but I can tell you, you know, we've almost sold several times. We've had to reinvent ourselves several times. At a business level, we've had to write out some hard times in the economy and making changes, doing business with difficult people. There's all those things that happen. And alongside that, you know, I've had babies. My husband got in a huge car accident. We had a recession. My sister died. You know, I could just give a list of all these things that you're trying to juggle as a leader and a business owner and, you know, the person making calls over here, and life's still happening for everybody, you know? And so sometimes you got to shift your tenacity from place to place, right? As a young person, I would not have expected the ride that was coming for me.
So this kind of takes me into my next question with you, and I know some of your background with your sister and with your husband getting in an accident, and you can share what you like or what you don't want to, but what do you do in those instances? How did you handle that? Because I know you've been through some really difficult things. So I guess if I were just asking like a general question is like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you and how did you make it through? But basically the question is how do you handle situations like that?
So when I got the call about my husband, for instance, so he'd been climbing the Tetons. And when you do that, well, when a lot of people do that climb, they do it in the night so they see the sunrise and then they come back down. And so by the time you get down, you're really tired. And he and these two guys that he was with, they'd taken a nap kind of in the meadow at the bottom before they got in the car. They got in the truck. They got in a head-on collision going 65 miles per hour. They were in a smaller truck. It was an F-350. It was bananas, right? They just got pummeled. So he had called me when he got off the mountain. And then I put my phone away because that was the moment I was waiting for. You're off the mountain. You're all good, right? I came out and I got a voicemail from a nurse that said, hey, I need you to call me. And right there, your brain just starts going to the worst possible thing. And it continued to play out for me. You know, then I got her on the phone. She'd said, okay, your husband's been in a car accident. He's in critical condition. He's broken his back. That's all I can tell you. You know, and then I had to wait. And I had to wait for them to life flight him because he needed, you know, a neurologist and all the things to happen. But here's the thought that hit me. I was driving home. I had quickly put my kids in my parents' car because we had just gotten out of dinner. And I was driving home and trying to call Mark, my husband's family, and all that stuff. But the thing that was playing in my head was, this is not our story. This is not our story. This is not how this was supposed to go, whether he was going to die or be paralyzed or whatever it was. And, you know, spoiler alert, he's alive and he's not paralyzed. So know that. Those are good. Our outcomes were great. But I was grappling with what is my new reality. And through that, I had to let go of whatever expectation I had for the rest of our life in that moment, right? And there's a lot of moments that come to us where we have to let go of our expectations and how we want things to be and how we wish they were, and just adapt and be flexible to what's coming at us. So I think out of these hard things that I've gone through and that everybody goes through, I've tried to learn to let go of expectations and do the best that I can in the moment. And when you do the best you can in the moment, that builds up to be a pretty good life full of pretty good choices.
Amazing. I talk all the time. When people talk to me, they want to know what motivation is all about. They want to know what confidence is all about. And sometimes it's easier for me to describe what it isn't. What it isn't is having when you have high expectations, it's the enemy of confidence and motivation, right?
But it sounds so counterintuitive, right? Like we should have high expectation. Well, and so I think that's why it's so hard for people to get there.
The better phrase is unrealistic expectations. So all the expectations should be just a little bit outside of your comfort zone, a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And then there's comparison, right? And then there's perfectionism. And those three just seem to destroy a lot of motivation and confidence. But what's interesting about it is you talked about coming back into the moment, right? And to me, there's nothing wrong with looking out into the future. There's nothing wrong with looking into your past. But it's like when you're driving a car, if all you're doing is looking in the rearview mirror, you're probably going to get in an accident. And if you're driving through a gnarly canyon and all you're doing is looking at the mountains, you're probably going to get. You have to come back to inside of the car. Am I driving? Am I functioning? How fast am I going? There's all kinds of checks going on there. There's all kinds of, what are we listening to? What are we talking about? Checking my rear view mirror, all that kind of stuff. We just can't focus too long in the past or too far in the future. And that's how you come back to the moment, right? Is just take care of the things that you can right now. And what a beautiful way to put it, the way that you said it. I had another guy, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to this interview to listen to the Brian Hunsaker interview as well. He had a son that's been paralyzed. He was facing cancer. And he's like, man, I just don't feel like I'm that big of a hero, because I was just talking about, like, how did you do this, right? And his son still lives with him that's paralyzed. And he's like, well, I don't consider myself any different than anybody else. I just got up every day and I just did the best I could. Yeah. And he goes, all I could do was stay in the moment. And he goes, there's no question it was a life-changing moment for all of us in the family, but I just got up and I'm not any different than any of you. And I didn't react in any other way. And I think that's kind of what you're saying is you were like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And then you just got back to the moment. You said, okay, well, what can I do right now?
Yeah.
This is all I can do.
And that's actually one of my favorite pieces of advice you give, because you gave it to my son. We were talking about soccer, right? Because I had him come see you for a session. And because like any, teenage boy playing a sport, or anyone playing a sport, you mess up and you get deflated, and sometimes it's hard to get out of that moment. And then you gave him what's important next. And so that's kind of all he needed, was to be able to slap himself on the hand and say what's important next and move on the field. And there's an element of that is a really simplified way of saying what we're talking about, right? Or I think you've done two options: what's important now or what's important next. And I think they're both totally relevant.
Yeah, and I mean, you can use either one of those. The other one that I use right now, because I've been working with some different players, is just NBA, like National Basketball Association. But it's, what's your next best action? What's my next best action, right? So I think the great ones ask themselves questions, and it helps them to create a more present moment. And so that's what what's important now, what's important next, what's your next best action. Those are all just designed for me to help people get to the moment, just to get to here. Like, we can't really do a lot about the future yet. We can't do anything about what happened in the past. We can do a lot right here. And so it's a hard thing to do, though, right? It's the thing that's going on with COVID-19 right now, Rachel, that's crazy, is none of us have any closure. None of us have any idea what it's going to look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now.
Totally. I'm hoping my kids stay in school for 3 weeks.
Right.
You know?
Social unrest.
Hopefully.
Social unrest and the way that's going, it's crazy. And if we get too focused on the future, on what it's going to look like and what this means and what if this happens and what if that happens, we can drive ourselves crazy with anxiety and nerves and all kinds of things, right? When what we can do is take care of today. Like,
totally.
I remember my mom, and you know some of my history, just with the difficulty that I had with a baby in the NICU that was born at 25 weeks, it was 4.5 months early, right?
Yeah. Not what you expected.
No, not what I expected. And I remember it was about day 60, somewhere in there, because I just remember the number 60 and I was counting the days, And I remember that day, something was going wrong. Her eyes were turning blue. She'd had a blood transfusion, and usually that would pinken her up and she would get some energy and she would feel better. Something was going wrong, and we knew something was wrong. And so I had to hold this little 1-pound baby in my own way while the doctor gives her a spinal tap, right? And there's just shots and testing and all these things. And we'd already been through brain
heart.
So we're going through all this stuff. And like you said, spoiler alert, she's fine and thriving and doing great. But
yeah,
I remember just being completely exhausted and basically bawling my eyes out, talking to my mom on the way home from the hospital that day. And I was just like, Mom, I can't do another 60 days. I can't do it. I can't do another 60 days in the hospital. And then I just remember her responding to me. She goes, well, can you do tomorrow?
Yeah.
Can you do tomorrow? Let's worry about tomorrow. And that's what we're talking about, right? Is like when life that kind of mirrors the water, like you're talking about, maybe it's the valley, maybe it's the mountain that's next to it, right? When that hits hard, all you can do is focus on what's next,
and at a business level, when you're building teams and like the culture of your company, have you surrounded yourself with people who are prepared to ride together on whatever that journey is, right? And so can you have life happen while business happens? And have you surrounded yourself with the kind of people who are going to prop you up and prop your business up? It's a big, so there's things you can do to plan for the moments and to get through the next day and to not let all those big things fall through the cracks when that stuff happens, and so I don't think, just like how in life we don't get through it alone, at a business level, you've got to build teams who are ready to kind of ride those storms together. And I absolutely was so lucky that I had.
You're like teaching sports psychology. You're teaching psychology 101. So I talked about the 3 enemies, the 3 friends. Is it your choice?
Yeah.
Is it your choice to be here? Is it your choice to be in this business? Is it your choice, the path that you've taken? Or are you doing it because your mom and dad wanted you to do it, your husband wants you to do it, your wife wants you to do it? If not, then it's probably going to be kind of hard to stay committed, right? 2 is competence, meaning you've had some wins in your life, kind of like what you were talking about. Like, my whole life I did stuff and then I was kind of like good at the thing, right? Like,
yeah.
you feel like you're competent. That's one of the benefits. But then the third one, which is the one you just talked about, is having a great team around you. Like they call it relatedness in psychology, or social support, right? But it's this thought that if you weren't born into a great team, then build one. And if you can't build one, then join one.
Amen.
And have great people around you so that not only is it fun to go to work, but they can pick you up and they can help you out when things go bad. And they can also slap you around a little bit when you're getting a little bit bigger than your britches, right? Like having a great team around you is so solid for mental toughness and for success and for confidence and for longevity and being able to stay with it for a long time. So it's just so fun to hear you talk about it. I don't mean to get off on my own little tangent, but I get juiced up when I hear truths being spoken.
Yeah, no, I love it.
So, if I were to go back to Olympus High School, University of Utah, to your peeps, to like your peers, and they said, Rachael Herrscher will be successful because she is blank, what do you think they would say? What do you think would, or maybe it's what you hope they would say?
What they probably would say is she's always trying to get me to do something. Like I'm just like this natural.
That's what you do. Now that I think about it, yeah, she's always trying to get me to do something.
I was always trying to recruit people to like go on this trip with me or like do this thing or, hey, let's go do this. So I think I'm like a natural born salesperson.
Let's call you a connector.
And you know what? I was listening to a podcast just the other day. I'm going to find it and send it to you. It was about kind of figuring out if you were to give one word to your personal brand and how you got to that word. Mine is connection. It's connecting people, resources, that's what it's all about for me. But I don't know that my friends would say this, but I hope they would say this. Rachael Herrscher will be successful because she will figure it out. So like, I am not the most prepared. I'm not the most talented. I'm no special flower, but I will tell you, when I started a publishing business at 26, I had no business doing it. And when I was starting to do outsource printing to China, I was online at 1 a.m. with iChat open, talking to the printers and Googling what the heck I was talking about in the other window. Publishing terms, right? Like they're asking me, what do you want for this and this? I'm like, dude, I don't know what that is. I'm going to Google that. And then I'm going to tell you what I want. I mean, you got to be willing to wing it. And so far in 15 plus years of business, I'll tell you, I've been able to figure out most things because A, the internet, B, good people, C, tenacity and just not giving up, right? Like if you want to do something, it's absolutely possible. I think it's almost just like that growth mindset. Oh, I don't know how to do it. Okay, well, I'll figure it out, or I'll find somebody who knows how to do it. I'll figure out how to do the thing, and so I think I'm good at that. I'm good at not stopping and being like, we'll figure it out. There's solutions.
I love it. One of the things that you just said reminded me of a podcast I was listening to the other day, and I listen to this guy almost every day. His name's Justin Sua, and it's called Increase Your Impact. It's like a podcast for leaders. But let me just ask, I'm going to go through this little scenario with you real quick.
Okay.
If we were in the African savanna and jungle, right?
Okay.
And you were to say, who's the tallest animal in Africa?
Well, you want me to say a giraffe?
No, but it's not a trick question. It's just whatever you think. It doesn't matter.
Because they have they're tall, but they're also my favorite because they have beautiful eyelashes.
Okay, they do have beautiful eyelashes, and that is so Rachael to add that on. I love it. Okay, so who is the fastest animal in Africa?
Are cheetahs in Africa? They're in Africa, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Cheetah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with cheetahs.
Cheetah. Okay, if you were to say who's the smartest animal, and this is just your answer. This isn't like.
Okay. All right. If I'm going for the smartest, you know what? Hippos, they're totally underestimated, right?
Totally.
They're just these big buddies who can't move fast and they're hiding under the water, but all of a sudden they're just going to come up and get you.
Right.
So I think they have strategy in that.
Hippos are great. I probably would have gone with monkeys or gorillas. Like I
know they're smart. I'm just trying to be unique.
So, okay, so now if I say king of the jungle, who do you think it is?
Well, yes, you're going to say a lion by association. Ooh,
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out your trick, Riley.
No trick.
Trying to outthink
No
you.
trick. No trick.
Okay.
But why do we all think the lion, he's not the tallest, he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, he's not the smartest, right? And you were just talking about these things.
Because he has the sharpest teeth.
Sharpest teeth, maybe the strongest. No, you could say that. To me, it's the fearlessness, right?
Yeah.
Like there's days where lions go without eating, but they get up every single day and they work, and they kind of like what you were talking about. They're gonna figure it out. Like
yes,
figure it out, right?
They will.
And that takes a level of fearlessness. And I thought it was really cool to listen to Justin Suet talk about that, because I've thought that about myself my whole life. When I was playing college football, not the tallest, not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest, but somehow I figured out how to be the starter, right? Somehow I figured out how to be on the field. In business, I feel like I'm doing the same thing. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the most educated. I'm not this. I'm not that. And all of those thoughts can come into my head too, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm going to figure it out. And if you want to be the king of the jungle, it takes some fearlessness. Like, and I'm not saying that you're necessarily the king of the jungle. And there's some things that lions do that maybe we don't all want to do to each other, right? like eating their own, or like those sorts of things. But the analogy fits to me that you figure things out, and it's because you're fearless. Like if I'm your peer, I worked with you when you were young. I don't know how old you were. I was like 25 years old when I was working.
Yeah. So let's see, I was probably like, Aminco days were probably 21 to 23. No, 22, 24, something in there.
You weren't married because you were Rachel Krantz to me.
Yeah.
So, and so it's crazy. But when I look back at you, I'm like, okay, this girl will be successful. To me, it's fearless. Like that's what
Because who else will get up and do an assembly in front of junior high and high school kids? That's probably the scariest thing you can do. And like make jokes that might fall flat. It was.
Yeah, I think that's scary. A tough crowd. I think that's definitely, you were stepping out of your comfort zone for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you find yourself? God, this interview is so fun. I can't even tell you.
Fun for us. Hopefully, other people.
Hopefully, it's fun for somebody else because I'm having a blast.
Because we're certainly entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any former mentors, coaches, bosses that you find yourself repeating what they said, or finding yourself acting a lot like them and going, "Oh my gosh, I'm acting just like that person"? And who sticks out to you as like one of those people?
I have the worst answer to this question, Riley, because this is actually, to be really transparent to everybody, you gave me some fair warning on a few questions to think about, right? And I thought, I have a really weird thing about, I can't point to, I don't want to emulate, I've never looked even, I can't even tell you who a hero would be. Because again, I think in my life, I felt like that puts me in an expectation box or striving for something that like I don't want to get tripped up by. But I'll say this. I have had lots of mentors and coaches and friends and teachers, and the act of being available and generous to people is what I would say emulate. And that's, again, when people say Utah, is a bad place for women to do business or all these things, we have more women-owned startups than anywhere else in the country. I have found particularly the men in Utah to be completely generous with their time. There are CEOs of companies who, when I was first starting, sat down with me and gave me hours of their time. People who've met for lunch, who've connected with me with resources, who've done all those things. So I think there's a generosity of your time, and also like your mental generosity of being willing to let some cats out of the bag and connect people to good information and other good people. And that's, I think, kind of the mantra that I've lived by. Because ultimately, I want to be Rachel in all my quirky weirdness. But I definitely am always swiping little bits from other people. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. The thing that I end up finding is that I steal a little bit from here, I steal a little bit from there, and then then I can only present it the way that Riley presents it. So it doesn't feel inauthentic because,
Yeah.
right. So I do find some coaches though, just have like this, like they had this ability to bring out the best in me, and they had this ability to point out to things that I valued. And so when I repeat them, I realize that I'm just repeating my values, like things that mattered to me, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
And, you know, I will say one other person.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one other person comes to mind, but it's nobody that I've ever met personally. So there's an author, Dr. Atul Gawande, and he wrote a book. He's written several books, but one I love called The Checklist Manifesto. I think another one, Being Mortal. He's got 5 or 6 that I've read, and his mental approach to solving medical problems and that mental approach kind of going out, I think it applies so much to business. He's my favorite read for life, for business. He is such, like, if you listen, he was just on Dax Shepard's podcast. He's just this like very level dude. And I love the way his mind works. And I've adapted so much of what he's laid out. I'd say that's been a big influence in like my thought processes. And so even though I've never met that guy, like I almost would say he's my mentor in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's totally possible. And I think when we read other people's books, when we're around other people's influence, that it can rub off on us. I think about phrases like, don't flatter yourself. Right. And I think, like, I just think that's a funny phrase. Like when I work with athletes all the time, right? And they're like, well, I'm just so worried about what coach thinks or about what the fans think or about, and I'm like, don't flatter yourself. People aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. Right. And like, it's like, he used to say that to me. And when I say it to players, like they take it aback, like, what? And I'm like, I promise you that person, you're overanalyzing what was said. They haven't even thought about it since they said it. You don't flatter yourself. It's not all about you, right? Like they could have been having a bad day. There could have been a million things going on. I just remember a coach that used to say that to me all the time. And then, you know, when I'm talking about like a championship mindset, like champions act like champions long before they're champions, meaning you got to get together your habits and your daily fundamentals and everything together long before you become it. You don't become a champion and then have those habits. You form those habits first and then you become a champion. And so some of those things I laugh at myself because I'm like, oh man, do you sound like a broken record of Coach Larson, you know, or do you sound like or my grandfather used to tell my dad to quit straightening chairs on the Titanic, you know, it's like, you know, like I'm using all these things, but they become my own. And
see, now all I'm hearing is, Rachel, we're not air conditioning the outside.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or we're not heating the outside if it's the winter. Right.
Yeah.
So, I love it. Advice that you would give to yourself 15 years ago. So 2005, what's the advice to Rachel?
Yeah. So at that point, if I had advice, or even if I would tell myself to do something differently, at that point, I had a publishing company, but I also had an internet startup. And I'm like, a lot of this interview has been like my love story to Utah, right? But at that point, I might have told myself to go where the action is. And so there's a period there in my business where I look back and I wish I would have moved to the Bay Area, because I saw other websites and companies that were a quarter of what we were, that were just being scooped up and acquired because they knew somebody that knew somebody. And that's where like all the action was, right? And I think there's a lot of benefit of being in the thick of some of those things. However, in the long run, hands down, like Silicon Valley versus Silicon Slopes, I will take the slopes every day. Salt Lake City and the Wasatch Front has evolved into an amazing place to do business. And believe it or not, it's also the epicenter, I believe, of a lot of what happens with social media and publishing, and magazines in New York know it. You know, big companies in the Bay Area know it. We're a hotspot, and especially for women startups, you know, it's an amazing business community, and there's so many bloggers and publishers and social media strategists and all of those things here. So it really is a great place to be. And the way the internet is now, you know, and the way the world is, we can do business anywhere, and I think it's incredible. But go where the action is. That's my advice.
Got it. So I'm going to give you 3 words, and I want you to pick the one that's most important.
Okay.
Bravery, courage, vulnerability.
Okay, so I have a question back to you.
You can't answer my question in the form of a question.
I can answer a question with a question. What is the difference for you between bravery and courage?
So bravery has to do with, to me, it has to do with a time period. Courage has to do with doing it anyway. So
Okay.
I think the quote that I love about bravery is that I'm no braver than the next guy. I just might be braver than you for 2 more minutes, right?
Yes.
Like
Yep.
it might be that I just stay with it a little bit longer, right?
Okay.
Courage is like I love this. I heard this the other day, that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's that voice inside that says, "I'll get up and I'll try again tomorrow." So courage is kind of like, it's kind of like courage. You're going to do it anyway, even though you're bruised, even though you're hurt, even though you're fearful, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then vulnerability, I think, talks to itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to choose courage, but I'm going to turn it on its head just a little bit, and turn it into encourage would be my most valuable thing. Because yes, like you need to have courage, and I kind of put courage and bravery in the same bucket, but as a leader, you need to take that courage that moved you to action and moves you to do things, and you have to turn around and encourage other people to come with you, to grow with you, to rise up with you. That's how you build teams. And sometimes you got to encourage yourself, so I wish I could be Googling in a separate screen to tell you what the definition of encourage was. But to me, it's an extension of courage to be able to go out and be encouraging and take people with you and build together.
I like that. Look at you stealing the show by adding a word to it. Look at that. Just a little extra, just a little something.
See, and if I was on my game, I was going to be like a little preposition, but I don't even know what grammatical piece it was. See, I really need a separate computer so I can be like, what is this?
Right. So a couple more questions. We'll let you get back to your family, business, and everything else. What is your philosophy on team building or establishing culture? Is it different now that we're in COVID-19? What's the key to that?
So my number one thing about building a culture for your business, for your workplace, is you've got to be a safe place to mess up. Okay. And that doesn't mean I'm telling everybody like, go be a screw up, like don't do your job well. But if you've created a culture where you're sitting in a meeting and nobody's willing to raise their hand and be like, I dropped the ball, we got to fix it. I screwed up. I made a wrong choice. This isn't working. And to have everybody else meet that person there or that team there and say, let's get to fixing it. You've wasted so much time on that posturing. Like how many times have you been in a meeting where you've watched people posture because they don't want to take accountability, because they don't want to be the fool in the room that messed up, all those things. So the faster you can have your team have permission to be like, hey, I screwed up, help me fix it, the better off your business is going to be. So that's a big driver of our culture. And so an extension of that is, you know what, it's a good thing we got a really lax HR department, because I have the sense of humor of like a 15-year-old teenager, which is why I probably get along so well with my son's friends and they all hang out here and I think I'm funny. But, an extension of that is we are pretty laid back. We make lots of jokes. If I even look at what we've named our weekly calls here in COVID, our main team call is called the Thunderdome, because everybody comes in razzing each other, and this is mostly women. We have one poor guy on our team we give him so much crap. And then my leadership team, there's 3 of us, and our call every week is called the Wolf Pack. Like, we personally think we're so funny, right? So I think just the extension, it all kind of boils down to let's not take ourselves too seriously.
Do you think that culture is easier to establish in the hiring process or after they've been hired?
Probably in the hiring process, honestly. And that's why I think if you get a job, it's usually because you knew someone and they're like, you would be a good fit. You know, I want you to talk to so-and-so. And I think that's why that networking is so important. So when people are nervous to reach out to their friends and say, hey guys, I'm looking for a job. Help me out. What do you think I should do? Who do you know? You know, some of that alignment happens in those conversations. So yeah, and I would also say everybody I've kind of ever hired has come off a referral for the most part.
Right. Yeah, I'm finding that most of you C-level folks that I'm talking to are pretty sure that before they get hired is the most important, like, weaning process. And not all of them have said, like, it's not like I've been perfect on this, but certainly when we've hired the right person, it's been because we did our homework before they got here, and it just made it a lot easier once they got in to hit the ground running. Then
because we're not in the business of changing people, right? Like, we're not. And you can, I think another thing you've really got to work for in business is figuring out who the toxic personalities are and how to keep them as far away as possible from your business, because, you know, it's not productive. You know, they're not productive partners. They're not productive contributors, right? I think we've all run into maybe our share of narcissists or whatever it is out there where you say, okay, that doesn't vibe with us. It's just, it's a time suck.
Yeah, it can be difficult. Last question. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh man.
Hold on. I think you might need to take your headphones out. It went all crazy.
Why? Did it?
You're sounding like a demon or an alien.
Hey, dang it. Hold on. Let me just like
Switch over.
All right.
I can hear you. Oh, wait. Try it again.
Okay.
Okay, we're good. That's
right.
much better. That's much better. Legacy. What do you want it to be and why?
So I don't want my names on any buildings. I don't think I really care if anybody ever remembers that I was here. I think and so this is really like not business oriented, but it's everything I value. What I want my legacy to be is happy kids. I want to have raised kids who are emotionally intelligent and happy and well-rounded and balanced, who can go out and live the life they want to live. And if what I did through my work and my life allows them to become who they want to be, then I will be so happy.
God, that's cool. I forgot a couple questions. Do you have time for 2 more?
Yeah, I'm good. Dude, Carpool doesn't get here for like 45 more minutes.
Awesome. Books and podcasts that the listeners to this need to check out, or that you've really enjoyed or have been impactful to you.
Yes. Okay, so Atul Gawande, any book. I especially love, and I mentioned the Checklist Manifesto, because I think for so many business processes, if you can checklist them out, you can find the holes, you can create productivity, predictability. It's amazing how much you can checklist. And I'm not necessarily OCD, so don't think that I'm like over here, but you know what, actually, let me just show you my to-do list today. I mean, every day I am like, I love lists and I love checking things off.
And you love to take notes, because when you came over with your son, I've never seen anybody take so much notes. It made me feel so important. A
blank notebook is the best thing in the world you can own. I write big. I hate lines. Just give me the freedom of a blank page. I super enjoy Dak Shepard. Put your earmuffs on for your kids if you're going to listen to him. He's, wildly inappropriate, but funny and approachable, and interviews some really interesting people. The Science of Success is a great podcast. Anything by NPR. I'm always bouncing through tons and tons of podcasts. I'll send you a link. I have a link. I've put together a list of podcasts I make my kids listen to. So mostly they're like TED Talks and relevant to grown-up stuff, but that's how I make my kids pay their cell phone bill, is they have to listen to 4 podcasts a month.
Oh, I
So
love
they can pay me $35 or they can listen to 4 podcasts a month and they choose the podcasts. And then, you know what? I'm going to throw you 2 audiobooks too.
Okay.
And they're great for life, but I'd say more enjoyable, like personally enjoyable. Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, probably one of the best audiobooks. And I say audiobook because you want to hear it from his voice, right? The way he tells his whole story is incredible. And then I just recently finished Rob Lowe's Stories I Only Tell My Friends, which was so intriguing and funny and fascinating and made me go watch a bunch of Rob Lowe movies when I was done. But that guy has like a whole approach to life and business and parenting that I thought was also fascinating.
So fun. I know that you're super passionate about screen time. You're super passionate about parenting your kids. Is there anything that or maybe you can direct us to your website or something that maybe parents or people are listening to that might be advantageous to them? Because I know that seems to be on every parent's mind, like how much screen time is too much. I mean, we just had a conversation with my daughter about Fortnite and what is acceptable to us and what isn't. And, you know, she's 8, you know, and it's like
real pain, right?
And so constantly I find myself talking about it. I'm referring people to todaysmama.com.
Yeah.
Maybe you can, you know, dial that in even a little bit better for me.
Yeah, and this is totally evidence that I do too many things, right? So I have Hello I Am as our agency. We have todaysmama.com is the parenting site that we have and run. And then I also have techresetproject.com. And so we've got an amazing ebook coming out that is just walking you through how to create healthy tech habits at home. I honestly think
I think I'm in that, aren't I? Am I in that?
You better.
I think you asked me. I think
no, just kidding. I thought you meant, am I subscribed to it? No, Riley is actually featured in it.
I love it. I love it.
And actually, look at this. I'll show you right now. I've been editing like crazy because it's going to come out later this month. And so these are like my highlighted like pages. So it's got worksheets, conversations, other things, because to me, like creating good tech habits is not about the rules you set. It's the same thing we've been talking about in a lot of these conversations. It's teaching your kids to have the emotional intelligence and the mindfulness and the self-control to be able to grow up and leave your house and then be able to self-moderate their habits. And so it's a lot of putting the why behind these choices and making them come to the table and be part of the discussion, you know, and part of making those decisions, because your rules are going to be different for each kid. All 3 of my kids are so different and they've all got different rules.
That's a good point. And I meant to talk about that a little bit. When I sat my daughter down, we talked about the reasons why. Yeah. And we gave her a couple of choices on how to go about it for right now, you know, and that we may need to be flexible and adaptable and mentally tough with this as we go on, right? And like change it and adapt it based on how this goes. But I think the one thing that I've been talking to coaches and parents about is like, look, it's not like when we were growing up where a coach just said, do this, and we never questioned why. This generation needs to know why. And if you tell them why, they'll go a mile for you. They'll totally help them understand why.
Yeah, it's the why. And then you need to take a step back as parents. And what we address through the book is it's all about the environments you set. The mental environment, which we just talked about, the why and the why am I buying into this, the physical environment in your home, and your digital environment. So like, if I even just look at the physical environment in my home, like when we talk about eating healthy, right? If your cupboards are stacked with Oreos and sugar cereal and fruit snacks and all the things, why are you surprised that your kids are overdosing on sugar every day after school, right? It's the same thing with our technology. Like, how many TVs are in your house? How many iPads are laying around? Like, what bait have you laid out in your house to get your kids to spend the time and be with you or have quiet time or whatever it is? Like, look at your bedrooms, look at your family room. Like, how are you encouraging time spent in your home?
Good point.
Anyway, sorry, I could talk forever about that one. That's a whole
It's called the Tech Reset Project?
Yep, techresetproject.com. And we'll have like a whole ebook that walks you through how to have those conversations and figure out the rules for each kid and do it together.
What else do you do? I mean, forget the phrase Renaissance man. This is a Renaissance woman. This is beautiful.
I did some lunges the other day. I'm trying
Why did that sound like Napoleon? That sounded like Napoleon Dynamite-esque. Like, I did some sweet lunges the other day.
Sweet lunges. I lifted some 3-pound weights because I was just like, dude, that's like, I'm over 40 now, so I don't know, maybe find those again.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Yeah, it's been so fun to talk to you. Please come and join us again for both a conference.
Anytime you'll have me to just like over talk the whole time. So
fun. You know, I told my wife it's not good for me to see you and your husband in the store because it's going to be an hour trip. It's not good. It's not good.
Rich and compelling.
Maybe we should just do this like once a month and we'll just catch up on all things Rachel.
I'm in.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.